All right, and we are back. Excited once again. We have a friend, I don't want to put too much pressure on him, but an icon, a mogul in the space of technology. We got Nick Caldwell. People want everybody to welcome in Nick Caldwell. Nick, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Thanks for the warm intro. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. So Nick, man, we're gonna jump right in here. Where you from?
PG County, Maryland. I don't know if you know where that is, but for people who aren't familiar with the East Coast, I usually just say DC or Southeast DC. But born in PG County, Maryland. It's been good over the last couple of years to see more and more people from the East Coast making their way out to San Francisco. It was pretty rare to see someone from PG County back when I was, make their way to Seattle when I was working at Microsoft. And now that I'm in the Bay Area, still not a lot of us, but, getting better.
To the best way you can, describe PG County.
PG County is, at least when I was there, I'm pretty sure it's still the same way now. But when I was there, it was about a 95% black suburb. Situated to the southeast of DC. Most people who work there have government jobs because it's so close to DC. So my mom was a public school teacher. My father was a public defender, and pretty much everybody I knew worked for some sort of government agency. And I think if you talk to most people from PG County, Maryland, they'll tell you a very similar story.
I think it's funny too. I grew up in Texas. I was back and forth into a small town called Cleveland, in Texas and Houston. And in Cleveland, you either had one or two jobs. You were either in fast food or you worked at the prison.
Oh man.
And that was just like it. It wasn't many opportunities and stuff at all.
Yeah, I think with PG County, it wasn't so much lack of opportunity. It's just that the best opportunities aren't equally distributed. And, I kind of learned early on that if one of my role models when I was growing up was Bill Gates, richest. I don't know if he's still the richest person on earth. If he's not, he's up in the top 3 for sure. And I wanted to figure out how to get there. And, over time, I learned that, if you want to kind of get yourself on the best track, you've got to be willing to get uncomfortable and take risks. So like living in a 95% black suburb was pretty amazing in terms of comfort and being in the community and all that. But the reality is like the best jobs, particularly in tech, which is the fastest growing industry for as long as I've been alive, are not generally in that area. So I had to take on a lot of discomfort. Went to school in Boston, Massachusetts, and then I got my first tech job, a formal tech job at Microsoft in Seattle. And there's no black people in Seattle at all. And then made my way down to San Francisco. And here I actually feel like it's better than Seattle, but there's still a long ways to go in terms of equity when it comes to access to tech roles. And I'm trying to, I don't know if this is what you want to talk about, but I'm trying to do my best.
I already know where you're going. I see the vision here. So watch this. You talked about being uncomfortable, and coming from a predominant black area, going to MIT. What even gave you the courage? Because that was like I would imagine one of the biggest steps of uncomfort, because you're not going to see a lot of people that look like you at MIT. So what gave you the courage to be able to do something like that?
Man, I don't know if it was that's a really good question. I don't know if it was courage so much as I just so strongly wanted to succeed. And I got kind of fixated on the idea that, tech was going to be the path toward success, certainly monetarily. Like, to be blunt, like I hope people in the audience don't find it crude, but I wanted to make a lot of money. And, I was fortunate in that I also really enjoyed technology, and the intersection of those two things sparked a lot of passion and drive in me. So every time I would learn like a new programming language, or up my skills along that dimension, my life only got better and better. I got access to more opportunities, far beyond like what I would imagine when I was younger. And MIT was kind of a part of that. I kind of told myself, well, if tech is the way to this better life that I imagined, well, what better place to go than study at MIT, which is, MIT and Caltech, I believe, are the preeminent tech institutions. So I made that my goal in life, to get into MIT. And it kind of went on from there. It's like, even throughout my career, it's just bigger and bigger challenges. The instant I get comfortable, it's like, do something bigger, and it's worked out. Now, if I could go back in time, I wouldn't go to MIT. If I could tell myself what I know now, I probably wouldn't have chosen that as a school. But certainly at the time, it provided me with that next level challenge. And I just, saw it as a every time I took on a bigger challenge, my life just got better and better.
So I've heard you say that before, that you wouldn't recommend MIT, which is probably, the pinnacle for a lot of people. From your perspective, why wouldn't you recommend MIT for people to go to now?
Oh, for sure, I wouldn't recommend it now. If people are trying to get into tech. I mean, even back when I was in college. And the reason for that is it's way harder than it needs to be. So let me put it into two perspectives. One is back when I was getting into tech, it was still true that, you would learn like assembly language or low-level algorithms, and that was seen as sort of the gateway into getting into tech. And that's been true for most of my career, but it's certainly changing now. Now, when you look at coding practices, it's less about understanding the low-level like bytecode of how something is running, and it's more about synthesis. So whether or not people want to admit it, I'm just going to tell you guys this is true. I guess I'm the expert on this. So as someone who has built a lot of software and shipped a lot of software, we have seen a shift over, I would say, the last decade or so, to a world where it's about synthesizing. Like a Python import, like one line Python import could replace, my entire first 5 years of my machine learning career, right? Like the ability to take dependencies, be it front end, back end, what have you, means that a modern developer is thinking much more about synthesis and how things tie together than they are about, let me go and figure out the best possible dynamic programming solution to some particular problem. And, going back to, MIT, and also I would say this is true for a lot of formal education, it really teach you about the fundamentals more than they necessarily teach you about the application. And in recent years, for sure, I think we're still on an uptrend on this, but for sure, in recent years, I've had experiences where I've taken like boot camp grads, people who are, didn't even go to college for computer science, but they took like maybe a 9 months to study Python or study some, front end technology. And to be blunt, like they are coming in better prepared than the college grads. Like just think it through. Like if you spend 6 to 9 months doing nothing but figuring out how to ship front end code, you will probably be better at that than someone who spent 4 years getting like a combination, liberal arts degree with a little bit of eng sprinkled in and no actual exposure to how you ship production software. It's like, so there's definite like good things that you get out of that kind of formal curriculum, but I would say certainly the trend has been pushing more toward this kind of skill specific, I don't want to say boot camp focused, but certainly like continuous learning focused approach to education. So when people ask me how to break into tech nowadays, I think it would be criminal to tell someone like, hey, I'm trying to break into tech and maybe I'm in industry for 2 years. If I were to say to that person, go back to school for 4 years, that would be absolutely insane. I would feel it's absolutely crazy. Like, so tech has by far the best monetary opportunities and growth trajectory for a career right now. And the reality is you can take a boot camp, you can do some focused learning. And because tech changes so rapidly, you can catch on to whatever the latest and greatest trends are and become valuable very, very quickly. So that's what I tell people nowadays. It's, don't make fun of or look down on people who are coming in through boot camps. I have multiple times at this point over the last few years seen boot camp grads just come in and rocket and like just fly up the ladder. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my
for sure.
My take on why I don't recommend MIT nowadays.
For sure. Okay, so with you just mentioned education stuff, but definitely being the main piece of it. What has been your approach to like learning technologies, maybe building on projects, yourself outside of, I would say, the day-to-day job?
I think I get the most value in terms of learning technologies from doing side projects. And I think everyone you would talk to who's a coder will have some particular thing that they're passionate about. Mine has always been games. So I actually got my career started. I was an independent consultant for don't look this up, it's pretty bad, but it was a company called 3000 AD, which made really terrible space simulator games. So I was doing some of that stuff. Anyway, my point is, find something that you're passionate about that, doesn't necessarily line up with what your day-to-day work is, and ideally teaches you something that's, cutting edge. I think the new JavaScript framework comes out like every 6 months nowadays, 3 months probably. And I try and find time to do like a game in whatever new framework happens to be the flavor of the day. And it doesn't necessarily, I would never claim that it keeps me as sharp as, I've been a manager for a long time now. So I will never claim like it keeps me as sharp as people who are, coding and checking in and shipping stuff day to day. But I feel like, it keeps my language fresh. I'm still able to have really good conversations with our architects and the ICs, individual contributors who work for me. Because I need to be able to understand the trade-offs we're making. Like particularly like recently, like new frameworks and new approaches to shipping software have like radically changed how we should think about the software development lifecycle. From monolithic swinging all the way into like a microservices approach now to where I think we're micro monoliths. I don't know what people are calling it, but being aware of these kind of shifts, you can directly translate into better efficiency for your devs and your engineering team, and ultimately like better customer experiences. So I try and do projects on the side, keep me informed, but like the reality is I have to rely really, really heavily on the team that I've built to keep me aware of the latest and greatest.
Yeah, one of your big next steps from coming from MIT was going straight to NASA for an intern. Talk about that experience when you was at NASA.
So NASA was interesting. NASA is a government institution, obviously, and I thought like, hey, I'm going to go to NASA and it's going to be amazing because we're going to be like launching satellites and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. So it was fun in the sense that hey, the logo's great, but the reality is, and I hope I'm not. If there's people listening to this that work for the government, please, I'm not trying to be insulting here. It's just like really, really slow. So I worked at NASA effectively part-time for 5 years, and I started working on this project called the High Energy Solar Spectral Imager, and I worked there for 5 years. On the 7th year, like after I left, 2 years later, they finally launched the satellite. The satellite exploded. Okay, so it didn't even get into orbit, just blew up. And then they had to spend another, I think, year and a half or two launching the satellite. So this project took, I think, from start to it's still actually orbiting the Earth, so it's not done. But like from conception to successful launch, if you will, that was like 15 years. Can you imagine? Like, I just think my career is now past like 15 years, and like all of the things I've gotten to do in 15 years, like the breadth of experiences I've had. I can't imagine doing that in one place at that pace, even if it's a cool thing like launching a satellite. I just really enjoy being able to get exposed to lots of different projects, and also, the growth in tech, private sector, just frankly dwarfs, public sector. So it's career-wise, I would say a better place to situate yourself.
So it seems like you leave NASA, and then you jump right into entrepreneurship. Is that right? You go right into consulting in a way.
Sorta. I mean, I was just doing so much. I was just so passionate about doing these side projects. Like, even though I was at MIT is teaching you. I don't know if you've ever taken like a discrete math class, right? They're teaching you these like theoretical constructs. You don't learn C++ at MIT. They teach you a language called Scheme, which is like Lisp. I don't know. It doesn't matter what it is because it's totally useless. And it was frustrating to me because I like to build things that people are going to use. And I feel like I'm paying an enormous amount of money to be in this educational institution, which is teaching me, discrete math and that's cool. But like, I actually need to, in order for me to be happy as a person, I need to build software that people use. So I ended up, not only doing MIT, but doing this consulting, video game consulting on the side. And that kept me, it kept me sane and sharp. But it also meant that by the time I got to the end of my college career and I started doing interviews, oh boy, I was like crushing those interviews. It was if I don't know if anyone's, if you've ever been in a position that you have to interview engineers to hire them for your team, and you get someone who comes in and they can tell you about the full software development lifecycle, test, with a use case of, how they not only built the thing, but, took customer user feedback and reintegrated that. You get someone who comes into your interview process and starts talking in those terms versus someone who can like reverse a linked list. It's like, there's no question who you're going with. It's like, you want engineers who are smart. Don't get me wrong. You definitely want like people who are solid coders, but like an engineer who has the broader perspective of the full software development lifecycle. And then even maybe further, like how you interact with PM, test, design, and then occasionally you get people who can go even further than that and understand like the holistic, how everything in the business ties together. Those people come in and they're like super powered. I mean, it's so anyway. I got a lot of benefit from just making sure that I was trying to ship real things while simultaneously, getting some of that, more academic approach. So that was the 1-2 punch.
I would argue a lot of engineers still have the piece of the industry that some of us like is the integrating process. And so,
yeah,
can you explain, to do a reverse look lens? Did you do enough leak code problems? But from what you just said, it's you focus on mostly products and stuff that people can use. And so coming from, a manager perspective, how can somebody balance that? Because for a lot of companies, like you just have no choice. Yeah. You got to go and do a whiteboarding session, even though you may not like it. But how can engineers balance that love-hate relationship that you kind of got to go through?
Yeah, I mean, I do hear people complain about this a lot, and they're right to complain about it. but we also, in reality, like, you can complain about it, and that isn't necessarily going to change the company's hiring practice anytime soon. Like, certainly not before you get on the interview loop. So I kind of take a practical approach to this. As a hiring man, as someone who is responsible for hiring processes, like for companies I work for, I make sure that the interview process is more oriented toward application of knowledge. So we're going to work on a project together that represents what you might be working on the job. So that's how I structure my interviews. But for folks who are listening and they're thinking through, how do I prep for interviews? I would say two things. Like, just ask the recruiter, the hiring manager, whoever is in control of the interview format. Just ask them what the preferred format is. And if you get the plus side of if you get like an algorithmic sort of format, the plus side of that is that if you put enough effort in, you can essentially there's only so many algorithmic questions, right? So I have definitely at points in my career crammed and studied all-nighters for linked lists, or string traversal or dynamic programming. I've definitely like crammed those. So the nice thing about those sorts of interviews is that you can like just study all night and eventually come out the other end able to answer those algorithmic problems. The frustrating part about it is like you never use that. It's like, I have never once in my career seriously considered shipping a dynamic programming solution to a problem. If someone came to me and proposed that, I would be like, dude, are you crazy? Like, how are we going to maintain this? Like, it's so you kind of have to hold these two ideas in your head. But if the company prefers hiring in that way, ask about it, get prepared for it, cram and try and study in that way. But I wouldn't get like out of sorts. I mean, I see a lot of people going on Twitter and like complaining about this, and don't get itchy Twitter fingers. Just study and see if you can study those algorithms. There's so many books, and it's fairly repeatable that you can study your way through it. But if you're ever interviewing on one of my teams, you're not going to get one of those questions. You're going to get something that's more practical.
Cool. So after kind of doing some consulting, after NASA, you found your way to Microsoft. Talk about that transition and how did you wind up at Microsoft?
Yeah. So this was back in 2002 that I started interviewing for jobs. So a lot of people ask me like why I went to Microsoft. So at that time, Microsoft was one of the best places to work. It was one of the largest software companies. It was also a time when we were heading into effectively a recession for tech. We just had the .com collapse. So the opportunity to work at one of the largest tech companies and have a fairly safe job that I could use to pay off my extreme student loan debt from MIT was like a pretty great opportunity. Google was still a startup. Facebook was not even conceived at that point. So Microsoft was like a phenomenal choice. And they also had a team at that time. They had a group called the Natural Interactive Services Division, which focused entirely on machine learning and natural language processing, which is something as someone who started their career as a game programmer, you can imagine that like machine learning was something I was like really excited about. So it was a great starting point. And, career-wise, when I joined, I was very ambitious. I told my manager, like, look, I want to work on whatever the most impactful thing you have is. Like, I think in my career, for better or worse, I pretty much never wait around for a manager or someone to tell me what to do. I'm always sort of out fishing for what is the best opportunity available and how do I get me or my team working on it. So at that time, Microsoft was, they were trying to, I know this is a long time ago, so you may not believe me, but there was a point at which the spell checker only worked for English. And they were like, hey, look, like, can you rewrite the spell checker for Word and all the other Office products so that it will work for every language on Earth? So that became my first, and I guess arguably most widely distributed project. I rewrote all of the spell checker code for Microsoft so that it would work across more than 140 languages. And it ended up, that component ended up being used in almost every Microsoft product. I think the only one that it didn't make its way into was Xbox. They had their own statistical based spell checker. But my point is, I always tell people, manage your own career. I get a little frustrated when I hear, particularly young folks who are trying to navigate their career. I think they listen a little bit too much to their managers and put a little bit too much burden on their managers to push them up the career ladder or find opportunities for them. It's great if you can get like a manager who does that for you. I think those are the best managers, but your default should be that you are trying to find ways to do that yourself. That like you're the best, if you want to climb the career ladder as fast as you can, it's best to always keep an ear to the ground and understand how business priorities are changing, spend some time networking to understand where new opportunities might be. And then fundamentally, like, if you see such an opportunity, don't be afraid to take the risk and shift and go try it out. Particularly for people who are coming in through boot camps or come from maybe underprivileged backgrounds, you see folks kind of get stuck. They're just happy. Like, I'm just happy to have a job. Like, I'm just happy to be here. So I'll do whatever my manager tells me and, wait and hope for the best. I think that's okay for maybe the first year, but once you kind of get your feet under you and you realize that you've got like an extremely highly valuable and marketable skill, I encourage people to like kind of take a little bit more control over their career. There's once you've proven yourself as an engineer, it's quite a wide array of options. To be blunt, like there's more opportunities available to engineers now than at any point in history, and certainly more opportunities for engineers versus most other job paths you might take. And you should embrace that and be aware of it and learn how to navigate your career given that reality.
So let's lean into that a little bit, because while you was at Microsoft for 15 years, how many times did you get promoted or to like switch teams?
The first 7 years, I didn't switch teams at all. I actually stayed in that natural language group. It's an interesting question. It's like I got promoted. For the whole time I was there, I got very good, performance reviews. But while I was in that original team, I didn't necessarily get promoted super fast. Once I I stayed on that team for a variety of reasons, like going back to what I said earlier, I was having a good time. I liked the people around me, but more fundamentally, I was honestly like a little bit afraid to try something different. Once my mindset kind of shifted and I started to switch teams first within Microsoft, I went from this natural language group, and then I switched into essentially the team that runs SQL Server, and then ultimately the business intelligence group. I started switching a few times. Once I started doing that, my career velocity skyrocketed. I mean, it went from like one promo every, 2.5 to 3 years to like, I think our average promo was like every 7 or 8 months. And ultimately—
Okay, Paul,
go ahead.
I want to make sure I get this. You said something switched mentally.
Yeah.
What was that switch mentally that you made?
The mental switch was essentially like, I felt like that initial team that I joined was, really like my family. I really loved working with them. And also I had kind of convinced myself that, that all the other opportunities that were coming my way, I would just contrive reasons. It's like all these other things that I might be doing with my career, I would find ways to just say that they're too risky and ultimately just stay comfortable with what I was doing. Because in my first role, I'd gotten to know everyone. I was at the top of the, review stack. It was like a pretty comfortable job. And mentally, what it took for me to switch was a combination of things. One is I finally got an opportunity that I just could not possibly ignore. My networking activities had resulted in me getting considered for a product team that was being managed by Bill Gates, who was, again, my childhood hero. And it was relatively risky. But one thing that I have since come to understand is that you ever have like a high-level exec taking a bet on a particular product area, particularly someone with the caliber of Bill Gates, like you should probably find a way to get involved in that. Executives reorging or basically telling you where they would prefer their resources being spent is an extremely good career signal for someone who's willing to take advantage of the opportunity. So what broke me of this mentality was, at first I wanted to be really, really comfortable with my career. And then I just had an opportunity that fortunately forced me to shift my mindset. It was just such a good opportunity that I imagined that even if everything went wrong, at least I got to say that I worked on a project with Bill Gates, and did that for a while. And I had another such kind of moment, because I'm still working at Microsoft at this point. So I said, it sounds risky, but it's not really. I'm still working at some gigantic, company. And a few years later, I was a general manager of this group called Power BI, which we can talk about that a little bit later. But I had another realization that, hey, if I started to take risks outside of this big corporate behemoth, where could I end up? And, how good things could, what could go right? And at that point, I decided to leave Microsoft and went to Reddit as their VP of engineering, which all of my friends at Microsoft told me this was insane. Like, they're like, this is crazy. You've worked here for 15 years. You're a partner. You're on a corporate vice president track. Why would you go take this crazy risk on Reddit? And I did it anyway. It ended up being the best decision I ever made from a career perspective, both experience-wise and monetarily. I dig into that. The point being, it's the mental shift that I got was, it's going to be me who controls my career, and that there's actually quite a large number of opportunities, and that the knowledge, skill, and abilities that I bring with me, they're always with me. They're not things that are given to me by a company that I work for. They're things that I carry with me wherever I go. And that's what companies should be paying me for. And, so this mindset kind of put me much more in control of, my career path and, freedom, if you will. So I'll stop there.
No, for sure. So you've made, like you said, you've made hurdles. You got up to partner. You went up to general manager and stuff at Microsoft. Let me ask you this: as you continue making these shifts, is your confidence in your skill set at the same level, or are they kind of consistently kind of going back and up and down?
I have this. Maybe it's just me. It's probably just me, but I am always trying to keep myself on the verge of thinking I'm not good at my current job. If my job ever gets easy, I get anxious. So there's definitely been points in my career that natural language processing group. I could have easily stayed there forever and just been the top of the heap every single year. I would never have become a VP of engineering or chief product officer if I'd done that, though. So for me, it's the instant I start to feel comfortable, I start looking for something else, and it's maybe just the way that I'm built. I like to always be pushing myself, and so far, so good. So if people are listening, I think what that means is if you're feeling what's the term, imposter syndrome, the way that I look at imposter syndrome is this is just an indicator that you have put yourself in the right place. That, if you felt totally comfortable, you're probably not stressing yourself enough. And maybe there's different points in your life, and you may or may not want to take on more, career risk. But if my take on it though is if you're feeling imposter syndrome, that's the feel. I look at it. That's how you feel when you're growing. You should see that as a good sign.
So you've made your transition to Reddit. 2016, Reddit still is coming up, but it's pretty popular.
Yeah.
But it's also too not on a wide scope of as far as brand perspective, as Microsoft. So I'm pretty sure some colleagues who was looking at this as a step down.
Oh, for sure.
Even for VP of engineering. So why that transition? You go from Microsoft to Reddit.
Ooh, there's a lot that went into this, so I'll just start talking. One is I was going to go someplace, not Microsoft. I had to do something entrepreneurial. I had at this point in my life, I had just finished my MBA, and I had spent a lot of time in Berkeley and the Bay Area. And I knew from a career perspective, I had to do something as a startup. So I'd already made my mind up that I was going to go to a smaller company. And I had different options. I won't list them all, but Reddit was probably the second riskiest. And certainly, my peers told me that I was absolutely insane. Because at Microsoft, I had a 300-person team. I was a general manager. executive role. When I joined Reddit, I had a 30-person team. So when you're at a big company, the way you kind of manage your career is it's like, how many people can you get to report to you? So if, me telling my peers that I was going from a 300-person organization to a 30-person organization, and also I'm taking a cash pay cut because Reddit is a startup and they're going to pay you in equity. Like that mindset shift was just insane to them. But the way that they should have looked at it is, you at a startup have way, particularly if you're an exec, like you have way more control over the growth trajectory of that business, and you participate far more in the upside. That is to say, when I was at Microsoft, we built this product called Power BI from scratch. It's like me and one of my buddies. I won't go into it, but it was very difficult, and it ended up being one of Microsoft's fastest growing businesses for 2016. Which is great. But if you think about like how big Microsoft is, tacking on like $1 billion or $2 billion business to Microsoft doesn't affect it that much. Whereas at Reddit, when I was there, we went from having a $500 million valuation to, when I left, I think it was like $3 billion valuation. I have to look up the exact number, but it was like a very, very substantial growth, of which I directly, participated in that, and equity-wise, benefited from that substantial growth. So, for those of you guys are tallying at home, that's like a 6x equity increase. And I was at Reddit for just a month. I was there for 2 years. All right, so we're talking 6x equity growth in 2 years. So that is why it's, at least from my perspective, a better place to be. It's like I was already going to take entrepreneurial risks. Doing that inside a big company doesn't make a lot of sense. Doing it inside a small company where you directly control the growth is meaningful to the operation of the business, and you get to participate in the equity upside makes a ton of sense. So that trade-off doesn't work for everyone, but certainly for me and my risk reward profile, it made a lot of sense.
So you're at Reddit. You're the VP of engineering here. I think 2018. I would imagine Reddit is top 5 most popular websites on the web. Is that fair to say?
Number 4. Well, I don't know what it is today, but we used to say number 4.
So number 4 most popular website on the web. And you decide to take another risk. You go over to Looker. Again, this is probably from a brand perspective, another possible step down. But you go over to Looker. Why again another transition, another bet on yourself? Like, what's the mindset behind that?
Well, these bets keep working out. So no, so in all seriousness. So at this point, I'd been at Reddit for 2 years, and I think what happened was from a Looker came along. One of their exec recruiters came along and said, "Hey, Nick, Looker is in the business intelligence space. They need someone who knows how to run product and engineering." And it's critical for the success of the business, because Looker was thinking about IPOing at that time. And the CEO of Looker is more of a business development sales background. And in order for them to scale to the next level, they had to fix their R&D. And my profile from Microsoft was as a general manager running R&D for Power BI, which is one of Looker's biggest competitors. So when Looker came along, it was like, well, this is like actually an extremely good fit from a skills perspective. And then because they're on a track, I talked to their CFO, and I actually encourage anyone who's thinking about joining a startup, I encourage you to evaluate any startup by looking at the same sort of metrics that a venture capitalist would look at. And I can get into that later, but try and evaluate startups, not just from how fun they are, but like evaluate them the same way that a VC would evaluate them. And, doing that analysis on Looker was like, whoa, like I cannot, it was such a clearly good opportunity where my skill set in running product engineering and design would directly translate into accelerating the business, that I just had to jump at it. And also I would add that Reddit was in a really good state at this point. So, I felt like it had a really good impact there. We had started to hire other executives. So it felt like a really, I wasn't leaving anything, bad behind. And I also had a really great, like, next level opportunity to jump after. And that turned out really well. My analysis of their of Looker's finances, as well as how much impact I could have as a leader, turned out to be accurate.
So you talked about when you're looking at Looker, they was looking at to go public. They actually didn't go public. Something else happened. Talk about what else happened then, and also the amount of what happened.
Well, I'll leave that out. I don't want to talk about the amount because I don't want to toot my own horn too much. But yeah, we were on a track to IPO. So I joined in, I think, late 2018, and immediately started trying to figure out how to help R&D improve. And like the specific problems that Looker had were related to predictability of the product roadmap. So, being able to ship things on time with high quality in a way that the field, sales, marketing understood what was coming down the pipeline. So I immediately dug in and started trying to fix that problem. And after about 3 or 4 months, we had a board meeting. Someone says I should toot the horn anyway. Okay, fine. I'll tell you guys later. After about 3 or 4 months of that, we had a board meeting. Sales, marketing presented. I presented my piece, and it was very clear that we were now on a good track in terms of being able to deliver a product roadmap. And, the board, as well as our CEO, decided to go forward with IPO plans. They started hiring all the necessary people to get that going. So if you guys haven't ever been a part of this, like once you start decide to do an IPO, you do this thing called a roadshow. And you kind of, there's a couple things you do, but I'm gonna massively simplify a complex process. You start to essentially talk to financiers about the value of the company to get a sense of how much the IPO valuation could be worth, and so forth and so on. And also this triggers what is called strategic buyers to want to talk to you. So as we started to IPO, Google and other folks got wind of it and were like, hey, like, how about rather than IPOing, we just buy your company? So we started to kind of shift gears, particularly after Google reached out, because Google is for lots of reasons, Google's a fantastic place for Looker to live. I can go into that later, but certainly after Google reached out, we started to switch gears and we started to essentially talk to strategic buyers. And I won't list them all out, but the net of that is Google made us an amazing offer in terms of valuation. We saw a really good culture fit, product alignment, et cetera. And we agreed to just forego the IPO and just make Google our new home. And it took a long time for the deal to close due to when you do a merger and acquisition, it has to get approved by regulatory committees, regulatory bodies. So ultimately, we were acquired for $2.7 billion. And then for people in the chat, when I joined, the valuation was under $1 billion. So you can do the math between that and Reddit. Doing all right. So I'll stop there.
Too successful.
It's funny, like when I go to Google,
so
if you type my name into Google, like there's 2 links that come up. It's like Nick Caldwell net worth is the next suggested link. I don't want to. It's weird. Anyway, please go ahead, Marlon.
Yeah, Google my name, Wayne, come afterwards. Anyway, So, Nick, you're at Google now. It looks like a senior director at Google. Talk about some of like the day to day that you're going to do, and some of the problems that you and your team are solving.
Yeah, so we actually just got started integrating into Google like a month ago. So that regulatory process took a very long time. So a month ago, we got our Google IDs, and here's me, like Google ID, and our Google laptops and stuff. And what I'm dealing with day to day is essentially trying to figure out how our product fits into the overall Google product ecosystem. We're part of GCP, the cloud platform, and we have to take Looker, which is previously sold as kind of a standalone data platform for building data experiences, and think through how it now sits alongside all these other GCP products and go-to-market motion. So I know there's mostly engineers on the call, but I'm primarily thinking through how we change our product roadmap, our positioning. Are there technologies or other services that we can leverage and incorporate into Looker so that the combined force of Looker plus GCP ends up being a 1 + 1 = 3. Like we call it like an 11x. We're trying to leverage GCP in order to make a much better combined product and have a much stronger go-to-market strategy. Now on the engineering side, there's a lot going on here, but to summarize it, it's integrating into Google's existing systems, all the way up and down the stack, from billing all the way down to moving to GCP Kubernetes infrastructure, and thinking through like how we integrate their design language and so forth. So in a word, it's integration. Like how do we take this previously standalone tech stack, and then figure out how it ties into this much broader ecosystem so that we get a better product as a result.
So Nick, we're going to open up a Q&A here, but I got a question for you. For the people who are tuning in right now, and I'm not sure if you heard earlier, we about 15 minutes before the conference started on day 2, we sold out.
Congrats!
So we sold out. We opened it up for 500 seats and stuff, and we sold out of each one. So for the people tuning in here, you've had an amazing career so far. So let's take it for the day one engineer. Go through perspective. The day one engineer, the engineer who just completed the boot camp, and the engineer who's already currently working in the field. What are some of the things? What are the next steps that they can do if they want to possibly, we'll call it, just mirror some of your success?
For day one engineers, there's essentially 2 things I would suggest. And if you want to read more about this, I have an article called "Speed Running Your Career Game," which goes into this in a lot of detail. But when I got my career started, I immediately started networking with other managers, skip level, other peers, and I tried to discover opportunities. So I would ask them, like, what would you do if you had another pair of hands? And if you ask that to the right person, you will uncover areas that you can jump in and help. Managers really appreciate that, at least the good ones. And then even if your manager doesn't appreciate it, you might just find an opportunity elsewhere. So step one, it's like try and get used to taking control of your career early on. The second thing, though, is you don't get to have this sort of flexibility and freedom unless you deliver. So you have to be good at your craft. So learning how to code, like in my first job, I told you guys I was responsible first for rewriting the spell checker. But that what I don't often tell people is that also came with the responsibility for fixing a 2,000 bug backlog. So I actually got an award my first year, not just for like, hey, doing the cool stuff around rewriting the spell checker, but I got an award for fixing 2,000 bugs as an individual. So being really good at your craft and having your managers be able to trust you to deliver good results is what ultimately unlocks these opportunities. I think my camera froze here. Hey, Marlon, is my camera still working?
Yeah, I think it's frozen. I see it's frozen on my end. Maybe just turn it back on.
1 second. Let me see if I can fix that. You go ahead with the next question, so we're not waiting.
Okay. Yeah, so we got a question from Faisal. He says, "What is an example of a technical interview question you would give to an interviewer, interviewee, to test their knowledge of synthesis?"
1 sec. For synthesis questions during an interview process, honestly, I think I wouldn't focus so much on that. I would say more, we tend to do things like practical use cases, like build a web crawler from end to end or things like that. Synthesis questions can be like, I would say it'd be like talk about frameworks that you've imported and the trade-offs or pros and cons of each of those. But they don't really make for great interview questions, to be honest, because you end up arguing about frameworks. And I don't know if you've ever gotten into a conversation with someone about like React versus Angular, but it can be kind of annoying. And I would say in an interview, I would generally not ask those on an interview question. And sorry, guys, I know everyone's like pinging me to fix my video. I'm trying to figure it out. I might just turn it off. Let me see.
Okay. Next question is from Steven. He says, "How to approach a recruiter who has a position that was not a part of the plan?"
To be honest,
there we go.
Yeah, I switched cameras. If you're talking to a recruiter, and it depends who you're specifically talking to, but like line level recruiters generally don't have any control over that. You can tell them like you're interested in a role. The person who has the most control is the hiring manager. So I think like you should point it out to the recruiter. All right, but ultimately it's the hiring manager's call if they want to redirect you to a different open role. And I would encourage you not to get super frustrated if you don't get the response you want there, because behind the scenes for every open rec, like if you see a job posted on LinkedIn or what have you, there's a lot of complexity that goes into just getting those jobs posted and processed. And I think it can be kind of frustrating for new engineers who don't understand everything that happens behind the scenes, because they're like, oh, if the job's posted, I can just, why don't I just swap from job A to B? But in reality, those jobs might be owned by two totally different hiring managers with different headcount, with different hiring priorities. So I would say raise it to the recruiter, let them determine if it makes sense to redirect you or not, but do not get frustrated. The main thing I would say is it's more important to get into the interview cycle. Like let them figure out, like once they've got an offer for you, if you might be a better fit somewhere else. Like just focus on passing the interview is my advice there.
Awesome. Next question is from Chris. He says, "Hey Nick, I'm always enjoying your LinkedIn articles. I am curious when you feel you are ready to share knowledge and experiences to the community, and how to start."
Right away. So I wish I had done this sooner in my career. I don't think I started really writing LinkedIn articles and so forth until maybe about 3 years ago when I joined Reddit. And what kind of sparked my interest there was I was doing so much mentoring and teaching at Reddit, because I think I mentioned this earlier, but I was coming from this 300-person organization to an organization which was 30 people and they needed a lot of management and coaching. So I was spending so much time teaching. I was like, let me just write and see if that doesn't accelerate my impact. But if I had known how effective it was, I would have done it a lot sooner. So the answer is now. Like a week ago would have been better. A year ago would have been better. But as quick as you can. And the other thing is it builds up your brand online. And then going back to what I said earlier about being in control of your career. If you have a good brand online, opportunities come to you. You're not messing around with like recruiters pinging you on LinkedIn and nonsense. It's like that. It's like hiring managers just reach out to you directly, and it puts you in a lot more control.
Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna go in with the last question, and then we're gonna as I wrap it up here, I'm gonna put Nick's QR code here so you guys can follow him on social media, follow up with him. So Nick, with your journey and stuff that you've made from MIT all the way up to Google now, getting to levels that you got to, what are some things along the way that you had to unlearn as you was transitioning through this entire process?
First one, if you had asked me like 10 years ago how to navigate your career, I would have been like, yeah, stay in one big company and work your way up the career ladder. So I unlearned that. The second thing, for engineers, if you had talked to me 10 years ago and asked me what matters most, I would have said, software engineering and checking in code is the only thing that matters. And that is certainly not the case. It's like at this point in my career, I understand that in order to deliver product to customers, it's engineering, product design, sales, marketing, finance, all working ideally, together in a cohesive fashion that allows you to ship software. And the more of that I understood, the better. And then the final thing is, I think like early in my career to be, I was much more selfish, I think, than I am now. And I think for people who are early on, I would give back sooner. Once you get kind of comfortable in your own skill set, you realize that you're not losing anything by helping other people out. If anything, you're making it better. Like particularly if you can reach back and help out underrepresented folks or people in the community, like take a chance to do that. People who do that are I used to have this cynical belief that like people who worked in D&I, like they just couldn't make it as engineers. And now that I'm a little further along in my career, I understand that that's actually a really goddamn tough job and it's valuable. And they're doing it to help us who are like day-to-day engineers and product people just be better and have better opportunities. So rather than be cynical about those people, I encourage you guys to support them and help out yourself wherever you can.
Awesome. Well, Nick, we definitely appreciate you being here. Definitely thanks for the response. Shout out to DevColor. And so, man, it was definitely an honor. So I want to thank you again and just appreciate your time.
No problem. Thanks for the invite. I'm glad I could help. If you guys want to connect to me or have any other follow-up questions, just get me on Twitter. I try and do office hours once a week now, so I'm trying to get the give back energy once a week. And thanks a ton, Marlon.
All right, appreciate you, Nick.
All right, have a good one. Stay healthy.
All right. All right, so I'm gonna put up Nick's speaker card here. We're gonna take a few seconds and then we're gonna switch over to our next speaker.